Working the night shift isn't for the faint of heart, but some experiences go far beyond just a creepy vibe. Tonight, we're sharing chilling stories from night shifters who've encountered the unexplainable while the world was asleep. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a haunting tale. We might feature your experience next. I used to intern in a recording studio in NYC years ago, where it was technically open 24/7, meaning there was always someone there whether clients were in or not. Anyway, it was on an upper floor of a building, and due to the amount of expensive equipment inside, you could not access that floor by elevator without someone letting you up. The button for that floor was locked out, so you couldn't press it from inside the elevator. There was a camera at the front entrance downstairs, another at the elevator entrance, and one inside the elevator, all of which could be viewed from the front desk of the studio. So when people arrived, you would buzz them in, wait until you saw them enter the elevator, and then you would have to push the button for the studio floor to bring the elevator up. Well anyway, one of the nights I was working the overnight shift, and it was just me and another dude, doing cleaning, maintenance, etc., when we heard the elevator start running at probably like 3:30 in the morning. The whole building is all offices, so really there is nobody in the building past 5 to 6 p.m. besides us, so we thought it was a bit strange. The other guy looks at the cameras, and there's nothing at all, no one in the elevator either. So although it's weird, we just figure someone must still be in the building and called it from a different floor. It made sense until all of a sudden we see it stop at our floor and we hear the door ding. We're both in the lobby about 15 feet away from the elevator, and we give each other the hardest WTF stare ever. I can't explain how much I didn't want those doors to open. We stare like a deer in headlights, completely motionless, at the doors as they open. Nobody is there, no one pushed the button, nothing. We both keep staring completely still and silent, and it becomes really fucking creepy as time goes on and the doors don't shut, as if something is standing in the doorway blocking the sensor. The doors usually close after 5 seconds or so, but we stared at it for a good 20 to 30 seconds or so before they closed and the elevator returned back to the lobby. We stared for a bit longer before simultaneously looking at each other and saying, "What the fuck, dude?" The next day we asked a couple of the other guys about it, and one of the guys said the same thing happened to him in the middle of the night when he was by himself. He said he almost shit himself. Maybe there's a logical explanation for it, elevator malfunction, etc., but it was really damn freaky since the place was generally kind of creepy at night and there had been some other weird things. I worked in a mine in northern Ontario. There was a death on the 42nd level a couple of years previous to the incident. It was a normal day underground like any other. We were rehabbing an old working that had collapsed. Level 42 was big, the drifts were 6 times 6 feet but went on for kilometers in every direction. It was about midnight when we saw the mine rescue team with security rushing down the drift. Naturally we dropped what we were doing and followed to see if we could help. We arrived to a guy who was as pale as a ghost. He didn't look hurt, but he was shaking uncontrollably. Mine rescue approached him, and he wouldn't have it. He would scream, and not just any scream. It was terrifying hearing the screams, like a person so consumed with fear. It had a tone to it that you wouldn't imagine could come from a person. Eventually he just stopped screaming and just sat there, awake but non-responsive. By now it was 3:30 a.m., and our shift was over. We couldn't leave him down there. We managed to get him on a stretcher that we could carry out. On our way out he kept saying, "The devil is on 42." Over and over again. About 2 years later, another incident report was read to us. The exact same thing, exactly the same spot, but a different person. I don't believe they saw the devil, but it is always in the back of my mind when I'm on 42. Night watch in the barracks at FT. Gordon. That's a night shift, right? Anyway, so many things happened in 3 different rooms that I could write a book. It completely changed my belief in paranormal activity. This one took place in the middle of the night, so this is the one I'll tell. I'm sitting by the stairwell on the 2nd floor and hear someone shouting in a room down a hallway. I'm on duty, so I run to the room and swing open the door, expecting to see some fighting. There are several people in this room pointing up to the ceiling next to a wall and telling me, they're doing it again. I ask them to explain, and they tell me that ever since they moved into that room, someone lifts up the ceiling tiles and makes funny faces at them at night. The latrine is on the other side of the wall, so I go over to see if anyone is there, and there isn't. So I climb onto a desk in the room to lift up the ceiling tiles to see if they're still up there. When I lift up the ceiling tiles, all I see is a cinder block wall that goes all the way to the floor above. There's only about an inch between the back of the ceiling tile and the wall. No way a face was there. 2 of the soldiers freaked out and ran out of the room and slept in the hallway. This was only the first of many incidents. Worked at a movie theater running the booths upstairs. The projectors are upstairs, obviously, in a long corridor. At night, after the last showing in each theater, you shut off the lights to that theater and the small one over the projector itself. Then you cover the platters to protect them from dust. It's not so bad the first few, because at least the lights of nearby projectors are still on for the theaters that are still running. But, as you shut each one off one by one, the corridor gets darker and darker, and that little viewing window into each individual theater is pitch black. That dull, steady whirring noise you've tuned out all night is gone and is now replaced by absolute silence, and there's hardly any light left anymore. Just the lights at the end of each corridor where you sit in between each start time. It's spooky enough, is what I'm saying. But one particular night, I'm throwing the covers over one of the platters, and I casually glance up into the viewing theater window across the way. And there's a face. It's a little boy's face, and it's sheet white. I know what I saw. I'm sure there's an explanation for it, and there's nothing supernatural about it, but there was a face there, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. It made an already unsettling environment that much more terrifying the rest of the time I worked there. Also, for the record, inside the actual theater, these windows are a solid 8 to 10 feet above the seatbacks in the highest row. So, if someone was playing a prank, they'd need a ladder, and even then they'd have nowhere to set it. Not me, but a friend used to work as a night custodian for an elementary school, which the building itself was rather old, built in the 40s maybe. He was the third shift guy, so he took over from the second shift guy at like 9 p.m. He was basically there to mop the floors and make sure no one broke in. If he got all of his stuff done, he was pretty much free to do whatever he wanted. Often after he finished doing his work, he'd go hang out in an office because there was a small TV to watch. He said things started off innocently enough. Lights turning on in classrooms where he knew they had been off previously, and cabinets and doors opening and closing on their own. He didn't pay much attention to it at first. He was sort of on the fence as to whether he believed in paranormal activities, so he just shrugged it off as coincidences. At first, he would go and check the noises out. Sometimes he'd creep around and try to catch someone in the act, in case there was a way in that he didn't know about. After a month or so, he gave up looking and just learned to ignore it. He'd ask his boss about it and just get blown off. Over the coming months, things progressively got worse. Doors no longer closed on their own, they slammed shut. He heard noises like children playing, sometimes screaming. He'd find trash cans turned upside down. He'd have things thrown at him, but he would be clearly alone with nowhere for someone to hide and throw things at him. He'd contemplated quitting, but he was making good money for being nearly fresh out of high school, and he needed the money for family stuff, so he stuck with it. He'd come in, rush through his duties for the night as quickly as he could, and then go and sit in the office, where he'd turn the TV to where he could sit facing the door, and that's where he'd sit until the morning crew came in at 6 a.m. He didn't want to admit that he was scared shitless of being in that school by himself at night, so he tried to tough it out and made a lot of excuses to try and explain what was going on. The last straw for him was the night he was sitting in the office watching TV and felt someone grab the chair from behind and flip him over backward. There was clearly no one in the room, and there was no way for anyone to get into the room without him seeing them. He picked up the office phone and called his boss at home in the middle of the night, said he quit, and said he'd come back in the morning to turn his keys in. He was definitely a believer in the paranormal after that experience. He said that it wasn't until years later that he found out from someone who'd researched the history of the school before it was torn down that there used to be a pool inside the school. A number of kids had drowned over the early years of the school until the administration decided to finally expand the building, so they filled the pool in with concrete and expanded over top of it. I drive a late-night limo/shuttle service for my place of employment. One night, I'm driving one of our limo-style shuttles. I am almost to the destination with just one couple in the back. They are a little buzzed and chit-chatting among themselves. The area of this destination is not a great neighborhood. So there are a lot of homeless and generally shady people wandering about at all hours of the night, and I'm very used to seeing them. However, on this particular trip, I look over towards this little concrete island that has a yield sign on it. I see a figure covered in what looks like a raggedy cloak. Now I'm still not alarmed because it's not uncommon to see homeless people throw blankets and such over their heads, and this was late October, so it was getting cooler at night. But then I notice how fucking tall this person/thing is. It is as tall as the yield sign. So it had to be like what, 12 to 14 feet tall? Now I'm in a bit of shock. Then I see the thing lift its arm up and point. The arm is unnaturally long, and the skin is dark gray. It took everything in my power not to slam on my brakes and yell out, "What the fuck?" But I don't think sending my loving couple flying onto the floor of the limo because I thought I saw the Grim Reaper would have gone over well with my manager. Speaking of the couple, they apparently didn't see it at all, as they were still enamored with whatever they were chatting about. I dropped them off, hurriedly did the paperwork, and zoomed back over to the area. It's only like a block from the club, and of course whatever I saw was gone. Not night shift, just a regular dude. And I don't really believe in the paranormal. But I had this one thing happen that I have zero explanation for. I was a teenager studying for major secondary school exams. So one weekend, my parents, brother, and grandparents went to a function, and I was home alone. For reference, because of the country I live in, our house has steel grills in front of every door and window, like a prison. My room is at the front of the house. It's something like 9:30 or 10 p.m. I head to the kitchen, which is at the opposite end of the house. It also houses the stairs to the second floor, which is where my parents' and brother's rooms are. As I'm getting something from the fridge, I hear my mom yell my name, so I say, "Coming," and start up the steps. 2 steps up, I remember that makes no fucking sense because I'm home alone. I call out to whatever, and I hear my name again. Fuck, that's so hard. I don't generally run, but I sprinted back to my room and locked the door. After a couple minutes, when I think I've lost my mind and was hearing things, I decided to head back to the kitchen. As I get to my door and unlock it, as if on cue, I hear footsteps in the passageway. Again, fuck that. Relock the door, grab something from my desk to defend myself, and hide under my bed. Footsteps stop at my door. Waited for damn near half an hour under the bed until my parents called to say they were almost home. Went to open up the place so they could get in, and nothing was unlocked or broken, so it sure as hell wasn't a person. It's roughly 12 or so years later, and I still have no clue what went on that night. Not a night shifter, but my dad kind of was. He was also against the idea of paranormal activity, but now agrees that sometimes there are things that cannot be explained. He was a college student working towards his doctorate in dentistry. However, due to school being expensive as hell, he had to live in a rundown apartment on the bad side of Philly. As a result, he would occasionally wake up at night since he had to scare off several attempted home invaders. Therefore, he was a light sleeper, and any kind of noise would instantly wake him up and make him do rounds around the apartment to make sure there were no intruders. After the second or third break-in, the gangs learned to stay away from the apartment due to his reputation of becoming Rambo to fight them off. He and his roommate had an old, really freaking old, fridge that had a light that did not work and came with a purchase. This is important to the story. The apartment building was also built in the 1960s but had been converted to a sort of loft house with only one apartment room available for rent. The roommate and he split it into 2 living quarters, with a tiny kitchen, a bathroom, a basement, and a barred front door with broken glass. The kitchen was directly next to the bedroom, and the walls were paper thin. One night, he heard someone moving around in the kitchen. Of course, he snatched up his hunting knife and investigated. The fridge door was open, and the light was on. An old woman wrapped in a shawl was bent over examining the contents. My dad yelled, "Hey!" She turned, and snap. The light went off. She vanished. And the door of the fridge suddenly slammed shut. To this day he has no clue who she was or what she was. Not during a night shift, but on a bleak, stormy day with just as much spooky potential as one. I was alone in the kitchen, sandwich shop, when I spotted a customer in the lobby. Never heard him come in. The door is pretty squeaky and closes hard, so it's difficult to miss someone walking in even without a bell like most businesses have. His back was to me, facing the opposite wall, standing in the middle of the room. I never saw his face, but he seemed to be an older man in his 70s. I greeted him with a hello, but he didn't reply. The stillness and the way he stood there, coupled with how he was facing away from me and dim lighting, it had been hot and humid out before the storm, so we had minimal lighting on to try and keep cool, gave me kind of a Blair Witch vibe in retrospect, but at the time I waved it off as him looking out the window or something while he decided what he wanted. Plus, I'm used to rude customers, so I wasn't surprised by him ignoring me. I turned away to wash my hands so I'd be ready to throw together his sandwich once he was ready to order. I'd had my back turned for 20 seconds, yes, this was during COVID, so I was counting, and when I turned back around, he was gone. Again, I never heard the heavy door open or close, and the only other door he could have left through was close enough to me that I would have absolutely noticed. He never came back, and I don't see why anyone would come into a sandwich shop for 30 seconds just to stare at the wall opposite the front counter and then leave without a word. Also, now that I think about it, he didn't even look wet, and it was pouring outside. So, I'm not really one to believe in ghosts, but a silent old man with Blair Witch vibes plus a dark and stormy day plus appearing/disappearing without a sound equals I definitely saw a ghost that day. Not necessarily night shift, but I used to work in a bar that was next door to funeral directors. Not only was it next door, but it had actually previously been part of the funeral directors, and the welcome slab outside had the director's name and year carved in it, like Ferguson's 1891. In Scotland, we were only open until 1 a.m. at the latest. There were a few different events, nothing uber scary, but the whole vibe of the place when you were on your own was so unsettling. Nighttime routine would mean one staff member would be downstairs counting tills and the other would be in the venue cleaning everything. I remember one night I was polishing the bar taps, and I saw someone standing behind me in the reflection. I spun around so quickly to no one being there and messaged my coworker to come upstairs. She called out for me from the bottom of the stairs before she'd even gotten my message, and when we reunited, she said she'd heard me coming up and down the stairs multiple times. The weirdest part is she was counting cash 2 levels down from me, and I hadn't been down one set of stairs at all, never mind 2. This place also had 2 sets of stairs that led nowhere, and in our wine cellar we had a massive old iron door that had a wheel to open it. I'm not sure what it was for, but the wine racks were over it anyway, preventing you from trying to open it. In the girls' toilets there was a bit that looked like it'd be a window but was boarded up and below street level. It was just a board over a sharp 13 feet drop in some weird underground alleyway thing. One night after locking up, we stayed behind for a couple drinks, and one of my coworkers was dared to jump down. She did, it was fine, and we were all laughing. She went so quiet all of a sudden and started freaking out, asking us to help get her out. When we did, she was just quiet and went home, and a few days later eventually said she felt someone touching her arm. Not a gentle brush, but like someone had put their palm on her forearm and wrapped their hand round it. In college I worked a night shift from 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. In the middle of it, I would often take a break to run home and eat there. I lived on the top floor of an 11-story high-rise at that time. The building was built in the early 1920s and had a reputation of being haunted. When I had ghostly run-ins during my break, it was always the same. I would leave my apartment on the 11th floor and hit the lobby floor button. If an off-ride was going to happen, the elevator would stop at the 7th floor. When the doors opened on the 7th floor, no one would be there. Once the doors closed, instead of opening at the lobby, the elevator would drop down to the basement level, which required key access. When the doors opened in the basement, the doors would open and reveal a long dark hallway with dim green lights at the other end of the hall. The energy would feel completely off, and I would clench my eyes shut until the doors closed and the elevator took me back up to the lobby. After looking into the history of the building, I found several accounts of hauntings. Apparently in the early history of the building, several prostitutes were found dead in the basement. I then thought that perhaps there actually was someone or something entering the elevator on floor 7. I worked as an overnight valet at a hotel that was converted from an abandoned late 1800s/early 1900s steel factory. To put it mildly, the place was a monument to human suffering. On Sundays, we were usually around 30% capacity, so most of the rooms were completely empty. Most Sundays, I would walk down to the lot around 2 a.m., and various curtains would be open and closed, and when I came back up, several of them would have changed from where they were when I left. I can think of multiple times where we had entire hallways completely empty, but the curtains would still change while I was checking the cars. Guests would regularly complain that the people above them were stomping around, and before we would call the room above them to ask them to quiet down, we would check to make sure it was actually occupied, because there was a 50% chance it wasn't most of the time. We would actually receive fewer noise complaints on nights when we were at capacity. I helped some guests move to another room after the noise woke them up more than once, and when I went back to grab their last bag, I heard it myself. It sounded like a grown man running. We sent someone to check the room, it was empty. We would also get a lot of calls from guests asking if someone had been into their room to clean despite the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door because their belongings would have been moved. And, of course, the curtains would have been moved. Our employee room in the basement was the worst. It had motion-sensitive lights that would turn themselves on. One night in particular, I was making a cup of coffee to take back upstairs when the lights in the bathroom came on. Then the motion-sensitive sink. Then the motion-sensitive toilet. Then the lights turned back off. Didn't go back downstairs alone for a while. The absolute creepiest part of the hotel was one of the first buildings constructed, though. They kept the original wooden floors, and they creaked like crazy when you walked on them. I stopped running errands to that building. It wasn't part of my job, but I did it sometimes for the tips, after we received 4 calls from one of the rooms that was supposed to have been unoccupied. When I went to unplug the phone so we would stop writing off what we were writing off as a short in the phone, I couldn't get into the room. The door rejected my card, the manager's card, and the override card. Just as I was getting into the elevator, I heard the electric lock open up. I went back, and the card let me in. The phone wasn't even on the hook, and after giving a quick look around, the room was empty. I quit after a few months. Don't regret it. One of the moments that truly made me question my sanity was when I worked as a night security guard at a factory. Our cabin was right at the entrance overlooking the parking lot. The walls were almost completely glass. At dusk we would turn off the lights, or you wouldn't be able to look outside. At this place we did the night shift alone, and we had to stay in our little cabin. Now, as you can imagine, being alone surrounded by darkness and windows looking out over an almost deserted parking lot, sometimes you got in a state of heightened awareness, some might say. One night I was doing my nightly busy work, and suddenly I saw something outside in my peripheral vision. I could have sworn I saw a small shadow sprint across the parking lot, disappearing between the cars. Now any sane person would just shrug and continue with their work. And I did too. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. After a couple nights I was truly paranoid and terrified. One night I couldn't take it any longer. Something was out there, or something was fucking with me. Either way, I had to know. So that night I just stood there for a while looking out of the window. Must have weirded some workers out. And after a while, just when I was about ready to accept that my mind was just deteriorating, it appeared. A small shadowy creature, about a foot high, darted over the parking lot. It was hunched over and moved in an erratic fashion. A kind of lopsided hopping. For a moment I was truly frozen in absolute horror. Then I realized I was looking at a weasel. Not long ago I worked for a roofing company in a small town in the middle of nowhere, and I was doing a job on a very big house that took about a week. So the first day we were there, it was around 12 p.m., and the guys and I were on break chilling in front of the house. Suddenly a really creepy and extremely loud alarm went off coming from the house, and we couldn't get it off till the police arrived. The homeowner came to the house and looked very suspicious at us because the only way that alarm would go off is if someone entered the house and didn't enter a code. We explained that no one entered his home and that it just went off by itself. The second day I'm charging drill batteries in the garage, and I hear what sounds like a lady cheerfully singing inside the house, so I thought it might have been the homeowner's wife even though I've never seen her. The next day I get off the roof and go behind the house to get a drink of water from the hose. As I'm drinking, I hear a plate/cup break inside of the house and what sounds like a frustrated woman. I go back to the crew and tell them that I think the homeowner's wife is pissed off inside, and they tell me that they're pretty sure no one's inside the house. Then I explain that I heard her singing yesterday when I was in the garage. While we are discussing it, we were cut off by the alarm that suddenly went off again. I was kind of creeped out about it, but I didn't say anything. It took the homeowner 30 minutes to get there, and he seemed agitated when he did and asked us if anyone tried to go inside. We all said no. Then I said that maybe it was his wife that set off the alarm. He got a weird look on his face and said, "That's impossible. My wife killed herself 7 months ago." I apologized, then said, "Maybe your daughter?" He looked at me like I was crazy and asked why I assumed there was someone in his house, and then I explained everything I heard coming from inside the house. He looked at me like I was lying, and he said no one's lived in the house since the suicide took place. I then just shut my mouth. He then told us that one day he was pulling into the driveway from work and saw his wife just standing by the front door in the dark. When he opened the car door, he noticed she had a gun in her hand, which she then placed under her chin and blew her head off. I won't lie, I was relieved when we finished the job because everything had a sinister feel after all that information. I'm in law enforcement. My partner and I get sent to a call for an alarm activation. No big deal, but this is not one of our usual alarms. It's a new one we've never been to before. It takes us longer than normal to find the house because it's way back off the road and no lights are on. We finally find the place, and it's super creepy. Spiders and webs everywhere, nothing outside the house like a trash can or knickknacks. We split up, per the usual, to check the outside for open doors/windows. I go one way, he goes the other. The house is 2 stories. I get this sort of garage/carport looking thing, along with a locked shop of some sort on the first floor, nothing weird seen or heard. Partner is still making his way around to me from where we started. I find the stairs to the 2nd floor and head up. I wind up on a giant covered porch attached to the house. And it's huge. Literally the size of the carport below with about 4 sets of wicker outdoor furniture. I'm looking around and don't see anything super weird. Partner finally gets to me upstairs, and we talk about the weird layout for a minute. During this time, I feel slightly unsettled but am unsure why. I start looking a little closer through the sliding glass doors at the front of the house. Partner tells me everything is locked up from his side, and there are even vines growing over some windows and doors. I start noticing little things in the living room. The carpet looks like it's from 1962, there's no TV, there are no electronics in general, and it has a very 60s layout. I thought all of that was weird, but I've seen weirder on this job. I then ask dispatch what the alarm activation was. I get told attic exit. Super weird and very specific, but okay. So we start looking around as best we can in the living room. No attic. Then it occurs to me. What if it's outside in this giant covered porch? I look up, sure enough, directly above me is an attic. I can even see the alarm sensor boxes on it. I look at my partner and tell him I'm not going up. He suggests we rock, paper, scissors for it. I'm an idiot and agree. I lose. So I'm going up in the attic. At this point, we've made jokes about how weird all of this is. I'm slightly unsettled but haven't said anything, and I've literally never seen an attic outside that has alarms. Also, whose house looks like the 60s? I reluctantly pull my gun out and start climbing the ladder. I should mention I'm chubby. Attics and ladders aren't my friends. Stick my head up just far enough to see there are no people and not a lot of stuff up there. And it smells really weird. It smells like old people have been living up there for 20 years. Like dead old people. Not an actual dead body, thankfully. But like the smell of old people has died up there. I quickly come back down with nothing but the weird smell to report. I shrug it off as we go to leave. Partner pulls up next to me, jokingly saying, "We're looking at this all the wrong way. We weren't looking for someone getting into the attic. We should have been looking for something getting out." We both laugh it off as a weird call/weird job and drive off. As we drive back to our hiding spot a mile or so away, me in front of him in separate cars, I see what looks like a person standing in the roadway out of the corner of my eye. It looked like a black female wearing dark clothing holding a light-colored bag, though I only saw the person for a split second. I'm not 100% sure of what I saw, so I wait and see if partner says anything about it. A few seconds after I pass whatever I saw, partner calls out over the radio that he and I are getting out with a person in the roadway at a given intersection. I turn around with him. This all happens within probably 20 seconds. We turn around, and can't find the person. The person vanished completely. We described the person to each other, and both definitely saw it and saw the same thing. No idea where the person/thing went. It was less than half mile from the creepy house. So we're pretty sure that we're both haunted now, thanks to work. We've had one more instance of weird, unexplained happenings at work. We attribute it to our ghost. So that's the story of how I became haunted and ran into a ghost that I accidentally released. I used to work at a psychiatric care unit. A few days earlier a man, Frank, had taken his own life. I don't want to get into too many details, but the weeks before he had been manic and unstoppable. The few days before his death, he was extremely depressed. The last days, when he was depressed, he kept telling me he wanted to get out of his room, out of the facility for some time. So we tried to do that, and I took a lot of walks with him in the area. It made him feel a bit better, but that one sentence he kept saying, "I want out of here," really stuck with me. I was so sad he passed away and talked a lot to his family. They were obviously very sad and also told me the opportunities he had to get out were really important to him. Those nights were weird. The night shifts I had before were filled with a lot of conversations with Frank, and we really had a connection. The night shifts after his death felt a bit strange to me, empty somehow. I missed Frank, and my colleague had to help out on another unit a lot, so I was alone. I talk to myself, especially when I'm alone, because sometimes it creeps me out, and talking to myself makes me more at ease. So I passed Frank's room and said something along the lines of, "I miss you, Frank. I really hope you're at peace now. And that you're out." The door clicked and opened slightly. I thought another patient had somehow opened the room and gotten in there. When I checked, no one. So I shut the door and figured it was broken because the pusher, is that the right word? The thing that makes the door close by itself had been bent because of the situation that happened there. I do another round. Frank's door is open a bit again. I check out the room and close it again. Push it to make sure it's not the wind opening it. It was closed. So I continue. Later I passed it again. The door is open. That's when I really got anxious. I checked the cameras to see if anyone did this intentionally. There was no one to be seen on the cameras. So I talked to my colleague. They mentioned they closed the door too but thought I forgot. So we inspected again. Sometimes other patients tend to go to the rooms of people we lose. But the weird thing is everyone was sound asleep. It was a very quiet night. My colleague and I decide to leave the room open the door, and see what happens. I swear the door kept opening a little more, and every time we passed it, there was no one there. By the end of the night the door is completely open and staying that way. By morning I walked into the room and checked it again. Nothing. The next day his family comes over, they collect his belongings, and by the time I get there for my next night shift, his room is empty. The door didn't open anymore. It could be my imagination, but I truly believe Frank went home with his family. The door didn't get any work done that day, it was just fine and stayed closed. I used to work overnight security at a nursing home. I saw all kinds of weird shit, and I'm not sure if it was paranormal or just my mind playing tricks on me. One early morning around 2 a.m., I was walking down this long hallway doing my rounds, and out the windows I see one of our residents named Don walking through the parking lot. Don had dementia and was prone to wander, so I go running outside after him. But I can't find him. He's gone. And that's impossible because he only left my sight for maybe 5 seconds between seeing him out the window and me getting out the door. And the parking lot is big and mostly empty. There's no place for him to hide, and there's no way Don could move that fast. So we're looking all over for him, and about 10 to 15 minutes later one of the nurse aides finds him. Don is in his room. He is slumped over in his recliner in front of the TV. Died in his sleep. I have no explanation for that one. Saying I saw Don's ghost sounds dumb. But that parking lot is pretty well lit, I didn't see a shadow, I saw a person, and I immediately recognized who they were. But there wasn't anyone out there. That one still bugs me. I have no idea. I work at a pediatric hospital in oncology. Unfortunately, we have to take some of our patients to the morgue, more often than I care to think about. I am on day shift, but as one of my favorite patients was nearing her end, her parents decided to remove life support, and she passed away quickly after that, about 2 hours before shift change. We allow families to take all the time they need. This family was having a hard time, as you can imagine, and I decided to stay late until they were ready. Because she was a baby, and I had gotten close to the family, I told them I would take her down so she had someone she knew with her the entire time. When it was finally time to take her down, I said my own goodbyes and left the morgue. It was around 9 p.m. at this point, and the basement was empty. As I was walking back down the hall about to turn the corner to the elevators, I heard running. I'm talking pitter-patter at a rapid speed. I spun around, nothing. Then I booked it to the elevator and heard more running. At this point, I'm about to lose my shit. Then I hear giggling right behind me, and the tiniest voice says, "Gotcha." When I told a coworker what happened, before I even finished, she looked at me unfazed and said, "Oh yeah, that happens, they love to play hide and seek." Then she just went about her business. Needless to say, I will never go back down there alone again.